With Tears of the Kingdom just round the corner, I thought it was high time I brought you a video that's been months in the making. It involved me going back and replaying Breath of the Wild to try and find as many hidden gems and callbacks to its rich history as I could. The massive open world of Breath of the Wild treats the player to so many Easter eggs and nods to past Zelda games that it's almost impossible to find them all. I've scoured blog posts, how-to guides and other YouTube videos over the last few months to try and bring you a list of as many references as I could find. Over 100 of them all in all. No doubt I'll have missed a few, so feel free to add your own in the comments below, and I hope you enjoy discovering a few new ones with me. And we start back in 1987 with the first Zelda game, and as you can imagine, many of the elements that were introduced here are still being referenced in Zelda games today, including this iconic theme music that was first used in the first Zelda, and there are little nods in the music of Breath of the Wild to this theme. Here's one of the most obvious examples. We of course have the hero of the tale, Link, and in Breath of the Wild, once you've finished all the shrines, you can gain the original outfit that Link wore. And of course it wouldn't be Zelda without Princess Zelda, who first appeared in the first Zelda game.
You have been asleep for the past 100 years.
And of course we have the evil Ganon, who first appeared in kind of pig form in the first Zelda game, and has been the enemy of nearly every Zelda game since, including Breath of the Wild, where he appears as Calamity Ganon.
To know Calamity Ganon's true form, one must know the story from an age long past. The Demon King was born into this kingdom, but his transformation into malice created the horror you see now.
We're also treated to a bit of a backstory in Breath of the Wild, which definitely echoes some of the art style of the original Zelda. A nice touch, I thought.
And her appointed knight, chosen by the sword that seals the darkness. It was they who sealed Ganon away.
And here he is in his original form, and his most up-to-date form in Breath of the Wild. Next up we have some of the bridge names. You'll see this being a recurring theme throughout the game, that bridges are named after bosses from original games. So you saw there Aquemi Bridge, I think I'm saying that right, named after Aquamentus from the first game. We have Manhala Bridge, named after Manhandla. We have the Gleeok Bridge, named after Gleeok of course. And then we have the Dig Dog Suspension Bridge, named after Dig Dogger. So yeah, most of the bosses have a bridge named after them. We also have the first appearance of Impa, who is only in the manual, so yeah, bit of a sneaky reference here, but she appears in many of the games, including of course Breath of the Wild.
You remember me, don't you?
And we get to learn about the Hylians, and I love how they are referenced in Breath of the Wild. Link's race of course being the Hylians. This is probably my favourite interaction there. We have the fairies, who first appeared in the original Zelda. in the fairy fountain. They've come a long way since there, as you can see.
As well. Thank you.
We have the first appearance of the Zora.
For I am now allowed by this freedom.
Again, who've evolved a lot since their original game look. We have dragons, first appearing in the first game, including Gleok, who's one of the bosses I talked about before. I think one of my highlights of Breath of the Wild is the music that accompanies the dragons. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of Zelda music, I think. And we have the Lynels, who again have come a long way since their debut in the first Zelda game. We have Spectacle Rock. We have Death Mountain, of course. We have the Lost Woods, first appearing in that first 1987 Zelda game. We have Lake Hylia. Although I think the bridge of Lake Hylia came later. But we definitely had the lake. And then when it comes to mechanics, we had the first use of warping. Which is a definite necessity in a game as big as Breath of the Wild. And we had the first shooting of arrows in the original Zelda game. So loads of references which are included in the first, Breath of the Wild. As well as the raft there just at the end. Let's go into the adventure of Link, the much maligned second game. And we meet the King of Hyrule for the first time. Not the same king that's in Breath of the Wild, but the first king that's mentioned of many, as you'll see as this list goes on. Dark Link. One of the armours that you can get is the Dark Link armour, which I think makes you run faster at night. First appearing in Adventure of Link, right at the end. The last boss, I believe. And then you have all the bridge names of the bosses again, just like in the first one. We have the Horse God Bridge. We have Rabboni for Rabonak. I'm saying these all wrong, I know it. We have the Karok Bridge. I think that's it for the Zelda 2 bosses. But yeah, again, nicely represented by some of the bridges that you can find around the world. The series really stepped it up again with their third installment, Link to the Past, first released on the Super Nintendo. And from here we have a fair few references as well, starting with a bit of a trope that carried on from here on in, which was the sleeping Link at the beginning and wake up Link, which recurred from here onwards and happens in pretty much every Zelda game since, including Breath of the Wild. Right at the beginning when the spirit voice of Zelda wakes him from his 100-year slumber.
Link, you are the light. Our light that must shine.
We get the first mention of the Master Sword in A Link to the Past. And that's one of the main elements that crops up again and again in Zelda games since that time. The three goddesses are introduced in A Link to the Past, and they are represented in Breath of the Wild by different dragons. You have Dinral, named for the goddess Din, Farosh, named for the goddess Faror, and Nadra, named for the goddess Naru. We get Hyrule Castle for the first time, and we get Kakariko Village, first appearing in A Link to the Past, as well as something that you've already heard before, the fairy theme. And lastly, a bit of a funny throwback, you have the cuckoos swarming when attacked, which first happens in A Link to the Past and has happened in many Zelda games since. Don't try this at home. The first handheld Zelda game next, Link's Awakening, certainly one of my favourites from 1993, and there are loads of different references to areas named after places on Koholint Island in Link's Awakening, including Koholint Rock, Yukara, I can't say any of these names, Yukuku Plains, Tabal Woods, Tal Peak, Mabe Village Ruins, Canalit Ridge, Martha's Landing, one of my personal favourite places to go in Breath of the Wild, and Goponga Island, all named after areas in the Koholint Island used in Link's Awakening. See if you can find them all next time you're playing Breath of the Wild. Ocarina of Time is when the franchise really changed again and became truly iconic. There are so many different references, as you'd imagine, in Breath of the Wild to elements from Ocarina of Time, starting with the Deku Tree, who appears in both Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild. Phantom Ganon. You can get his outfit, which is great to walk around and scaring the locals for sure. We are introduced to another race, many races actually in Ocarina of Time, beginning with the Gorons, the wonderful Gorons, making their debut here. Bit of a morbid one this, but the Bigorons, I've often thought that they were represented by those skulls that the enemies hide out in.
I knew you wouldn't let us down.
And we have the Gerudo making their first appearance in Ocarina of Time.
And Noboros is ours once again. Which means that finally we can complete what we started.
We also find out that Ganon was once a Gerudo, or Ganondorf. We meet the Sheikah, another race first appearing in Ocarina of Time, and discover that Impa was once a Sheikah as well. And the first time that we find the Hylian shield or Master Shield. One of the first places you visit in Breath of the Wild is a rather run-down looking Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time. And then we have a couple of places that are named after the scarecrows in Ocarina of Time. As well as Quaypora Pass, which is named after the owl who guides Link in several of the games. We have a few places that are named after the children from the Kokori. And we are introduced to Zora's domain. One of the most fun throwbacks you can find in Breath of the Wild is a dilapidated Lon Lon ranch. You definitely have to take your horse for a bit of a ride around here just to relive the old times, harking back to one of the highlights of the Ocarina of Time game. And we have the castle town or square, as well as the Gerudo Desert. So many things are referenced from Ocarina of Time, which you can understand with it being one of the most iconic games of the series. And you also get to find Epona, his horse, with a amiibo. Majora's Mask, and the biggest link I could find is the Blood Moon, which resets the world, very much similar to the big moon idea in Majora's Mask, although a little bit more tenuous there.
It rises to its peak under the hour of the blood moon. By its glow, the aimless spirits of monsters slain in the name of the light returned.
One of the DLC items you can find is Majora's Mask itself. And then you have lots of areas that are named after the Zora band from Majora's Mask, including Lulu Lake, Macau Lake, apologies for butchering all of these, and Toto Lake. And who can forget Tingle? You get to find Tingle's outfit if you so desire to walk around in that get-up. You can do just that. Then we have the Oracle of Seasons and the Lodrum Headland and the Brianna Plain are both located in Lanayru Great Spring, taking their names from the overworlds of the Oracle games Holodrum and Labrinia. And in Seasons you also get to ride one of the fantastic beasts of Hyrule, as you can see here. Then in Oracle of Ages we have the aforementioned Labrinia Headland, Lodrum Headland, and Brianna Plain, which are named after those two worlds that appear in the Oracle games. And the other thing I found that harked back to it was the Eventide challenge, which is very similar to a challenge in Oracle of Ages, where you lose all your weapons on an island and have to find a way to get them all back again. We're now up to one of the most underrated of the Zelda games, the amazing Wind Waker, and lots of references here, starting off with Beedle, who is in Wind Waker and for some reason turns up in Breath of the Wild as well.
Well, I'll be plucked.
We have the Rito making their first introduction in the Wind Waker, looking very different again, looking more like a Hylian with a beak attached in the original Wind Waker, but a bit more evolved in this one. We have another new species, the Koruks, making their debut in Wind Waker. and they obviously form a big part of the side quests in Breath of the Wild. Trying to find all 900 of them. You're a more patient man than me if you have achieved that. You also can get a Korok mask as one of the DLCs, and Tingle's brothers, Ankle, Knuckle and David Jr. are all referenced in islands on the side of Hyrule, as well as the fireflies, which make up one of the side quests. We have the lovely looking island lobster shirt, which you can get in Breath of the Wild, and the most important part of Wind Waker, which is the sailing, which I do find a lot more fun to do in Wind Waker, but you can do it with a well-equipped Deku Leaf in Breath of the Wild. I did set myself a challenge to see how far I could sail. I did make it round most of the island. As you can see here, this is the path that I took. So it is doable, but yeah, a lot more clunky, I would say, than the Wind Waker attempt that you can do. We also have the Deku Leaf, which I think has a different name in Wind Waker. Can't remember what it's called actually, but yeah, it's maybe the Korok Leaf. And we have Mount Daphnis, named after the King of Hyrule from the Wind Waker, and a bit of a weird one, the rock salt from the ancient sea, as it says in the description of this item, meaning that it must have come from the Wind Waker. We have only one that I could find from Four Swords Adventures, with it being such a small game. It does introduce Vati, and I do think there's a bit of a nod to Vati with the glowing eyeballs in Breath of the Wild. But again, bit of a stretch, that one. Then into one of my favourites, the Minish Cap. We have the Minchi Woods, which are named no doubt after the Minish people. And another name for the Minish are the Pico and the Picora, sorry, and there is Pico Pond in Breath of the Wild that references them, as well as Crinell Hills, a mountain region in the Minish Cap. On to Twilight Princess from 2006. Lots of references in Breath of the Wild to Twilight Princess, including Midna's helmet, which you can get on the DLC. Another item from the DLC is Xant's helmet. There is the Armour of Twilight, but you need to get that from, you need to have an amiibo for that. We have the Zora's armour, first making an appearance, and we have the, of course, very divisive motion controls, both in Twilight Princess and in Breath of the Wild, in one of the hardest dungeons, I have to say that one. We have the Gerudo Desert, which is mentioned, I think, in Ocarina of Time, but is more prevalent. And we have, as you can see here, the Arbiter's Ground, a dungeon in Twilight Princess located in the Gerudo Desert. We have the shield surfing that happens for the first time in Twilight Princess, and there's some great fun to be had there. Here we have the Rutala Dam and the Rallis Pond, namesakes of Queen Rutala and her son, Prince Rallis. And a bit of a stretch, but I do believe the look of the Twilight Zone is definitely in keeping with the castle. Here we have the Phantom Hourglass, and the only one I could find from this was Linebeck Island, named after Link's friend from Phantom Hourglass. Then on to Spirit Tracks, we have the Phantom Armour that you can see here. And we have Lake Colombo, named after the Locomo tribe from Spirit Tracks. And we have the use of the train. Again, a lot more clunky than it is in Spirit Tracks, but it can be done. Up next, Skyward Sword from 2011. We have some bridges. The bridges are back, and this time they are named after the instructors. We have Aegis Bridge, named after the the fighting instructor. We have Horwell Bridge, and we have Owlin Bridge. We have the Place of Demise, named after Demise himself. I'm not sure if this is just named after him or whether this is where it first occurred. It may well be. And those wonderful looking statues and springs that first are mentioned Skyward Sword, seen, which look almost identical in Breath of the Wild. And where would we be without that paraglider that first makes its entrance in Skyward Sword? We're nearly at the end now, but just enough time to talk about A Link Between Worlds from 2013. And the major place from here is Orin Bridge, which is named after Queen Orin from Link Between Worlds. And with the DLC, you can also get Ravio's hood. And then Triforce Heroes. I could only find one reference from this, which is Tuft Mountain, which is named after King Tuft from Triforce Heroes. And in other media, we have the Mario Kart 8, which features the wonderful Master Cycle, which is a great, if completely daft, extra DLC item that you can get in Breath of the Wild. There we are, all the references that I could find. I hope you enjoyed visiting some of those with me. I hope you enjoy looking back over Breath of the Wild and maybe hunting down some of those references for yourself. Let me know if there are any that I missed out in the comments below. And as always, thanks so much for watching and take care.